Okay, welcome everyone. Nice to see you here. That was really a moving and incredible lunch session, wasn't it? I don't know that I've ever seen a conference discussion like that. I think I'm still sort of processing that. So we're going to get much more sort of concrete and specific and in the policy world for our next discussion. We have an amazing lineup of panelists. I've had the good fortune to talk about this topic with them, but together and individually. And every time I talk with them, I come away smarter. And so I think I can very confidently assure you that you will walk away smarter about this topic for having spent time with our group today. We're here to discuss about how to expand and diversify the pathways into the tech ecosystem. So here's how we're going to tackle this over the next hour or so. I'm going to give a few minutes on context. I'm going to introduce our speakers, then start with opening questions to each of them and facilitate a conversation. We're getting started a little bit late, so I don't know how much time we'll have for questions, but then I'll close with a lightning round for each of our panelists. So let's get started. So why is it so important to expand pathways into tech jobs? Well, really, at a high level, there are a lot of these jobs, they pay really well, and a lot of them are going unfilled across the country. So there aren't enough people in tech, and there isn't enough diversity in tech. Just to give you a sense of kind of some data about this system. Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that computing and coding jobs are growing much faster than other sectors, about 13%. Codeorg finds more than 600,000 open computing jobs with a median wage of just over $91,000. And over the last couple of years, we've seen the big tech firms realize that they can fill open jobs anywhere. Not just Boston, not just Austin, not just Silicon Valley, but literally anywhere you have a high-speed internet connection. Meanwhile, Reboot Representation finds that the share of Black, Latina, and Native American women receiving computer science degrees has actually dropped by 1/3 over the last decade. In 2020, only 21% of computer programmers were women, only 6% were African American, and 7% were Hispanic. So clearly, there's a disconnect between what industry needs, what equity demands, and what education is delivering. We're leaving talented people behind, and we're leaving great jobs unfilled. Now, at College Board, my organization, we've been a part of an effort to fix this. A few years ago, we partnered with the National Science Foundation to fundamentally expand and change the invitation to computer science. Instead of saying, hey, you want to come write code all day with a bunch of nerdy guys? We said, hey, you got a problem in your community you want to solve? Come learn computer coding and you can solve that. And it worked. The number of women taking APCSP tripled between 2017 and 2020, tripled. And in a few short years, AP computer science principals also dramatically increased the number of students of color taking computer science. And more importantly, we've also got research that says not only do they take the course, but then they also move further down the pipeline and go on and study and major in STEM fields. So what does that mean? In that pipeline, in those hiring pools, that means that those students are going to be showing up in the hiring pools of Amazon, Google, Microsoft, MasterCard. And so that's how rethinking the pipeline at all of these points along the pipeline can measurably impact what happens in that tech pipeline. So we've got great leaders to talk about that today. How they are rethinking the pipeline at all of these points. So our new capability, the College Board Foundation, is going to continue this work, engaging with powerful partners like the ones we have here today, to make and measure progress in both access and diversity at each part of the pipeline. Because making American tech look more like America will take a range of organization and leaders working together over time. Which brings us to our terrific panel today. First, I'd like to welcome Governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson. Governor Hutchinson has made Arkansas a national leader in building career pathways through computer science education. The state has shown steady increases in computer science enrollment in high school at the high school level. And next year, Arkansas will take an even bigger step by requiring that every student earn at least one computer science credit in high school. He said to me when we talked earlier this year, When people have coding skills and computer science skills and they have access to high-speed broadband, they can run the world from their front porch in a small town. He's taking that message on the road as his chairman of the National Governors Association, where he has launched a national effort to expand and improve computer science education as a part of his leadership initiative. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership and welcome. Jackie Smalls is the Chief Program Officer at Codeorg, and before that, she served as Vice President of Black Girls Code. Codeorg has a vision for every student to explore computer science as early as elementary school, so they build an interest in the field early on. They work with 60 million students, including 27 million young women. Jackie has been a field scientist for the U.S. Army, a teacher, a school administrator, a consultant on curriculum and teacher training programs. She knows STEM education from every single angle. Thank you for joining us, Jackie. Dewana Franklin Davis is CEO of Reboot Representation. Dewana grew up in a nerdy household outside Chicago, that's her word, not mine, where all the neighborhood kids used to come and play 8-bit computer games in her living room. But as she moved through high school, her love of technology got lonelier and lonelier. And prior to joining Reboot, Dewana was a top executive at MasterCard, where she saw the need to support women in tech, and particularly women of color. She left corporate America to tackle diversity in the tech pipeline. To do that, Reboot has formed a coalition of leading tech companies. Their goal is to double the number of Black, Latina, and Native American women graduating with computer science degrees by 2025. It's great to be with you, Dewana. Thank you for being here. And finally, we have what we call the business end of the pipeline. We're joined by Victor Reynoso, who is the Global Director of Amazon Future Engineers. He is a polymath, an entrepreneur, a moderator at the Aspen Institute, and he was DC's first deputy mayor for education. The Amazon Future Engineers program works with teachers and students to explicitly expand and diversify the tech pipeline, provides professional development and learning opportunities for teachers, and great resources for students, like how to explore tech fields, how to project-based learning, as well as scholarships and internship. Thank you for your leadership, Victor, and welcome. So I hope you see that we intentionally have very impactful leaders at every single part of the pipeline. So I want to start with you, Governor Hutchinson. Of all the things that a governor can focus on, how did computer science become your signature issue?
Well, thank you, and I should emphasize, first of all, that I love history. I don't want to diminish the arts education. I like music, and after the last presentation, I'm a lover of philosophy. But, so I don't want to diminish any of that, but practical education in the future dictates that we need to engage our young people in computer science education as well. And so how did I get interested in it? Actually, after our 9/11 attack, President Bush asked me to serve as Undersecretary at Homeland Security, and I was responsible for border security. Well, it didn't take me long to realize it was that techie developing software that allowed us to do data analytics on people coming into our country, and that kept us safer. And you expand that into our container ships and on down the line. And so that made me realize and appreciate technology, security, and the future of our country. Fast forward to 2014 when I ran for governor, I wanted to support education, and my granddaughter, Ellabeth, brought me a mobile campaign app. She was 11 years old, and she had created it with her dad on buildapp.com, I believe it was. And I said, if my 11-year-old granddaughter can do this, where you can volunteer, you can contribute, you can do all of this on an app that she prepared, we ought to have that in every high school and school system in Arkansas. And so I actually probably was the first candidate for governor ever to mention the word computer coding. And I said we ought to have it in every high school in Arkansas. And as a result of that campaign, I had momentum. I had, as Governor Bush says, a mandate. And so we first in 2015 said we're going to offer this in every high school. And that was an equity issue for me because I didn't want it just to be in the urban schools. I went to a very small rural school. We want to make sure it's available there. When we started out, we had 1,100 students across Arkansas taking computer science. Each year it grew to last year we had over 10,000 students taking computer science. I thought maybe we plateaued, and this year it went up another 20%, so we're at 12,500. And as was indicated, this year we became, I believe, the third state to actually make it a graduation requirement. And so everybody's going to be taking it. We also enhanced the quality. We put money in retraining teachers. We started out with about 20 teachers that were certified in computer science. Now we have close to 600 across the state. And so it's an investment, but whenever we first started it, it was not mandatory for the students to take it. So I went to over 80 high schools marketing computer science and talking to them about the future. And it took a while for that farm boy or girl from rural Arkansas to understand that this can impact their life. As a result of COVID, we all know that computer coding, internet access, education and medicine, all of that is interconnected. So that's my interest, and that's a little bit of the success story that we had in Arkansas. I'm chairman of the National Governor Association now, and that's my signature issue, computer science, focusing on what other states have done as well, how governors are leading in this, and how it's really a national security issue for our country.
So thank you, Governor. Clearly, your leadership year over year, to make progress and to stick to measurement and to watch the data and to look at the barriers, really, really inspiring. Jackie, Code.org has an ambitious goal to make computer science available to every student with equitable participation across race and gender. Where do you start? Where do you start to tackle that? High school, middle school, earlier, and then how do you measure?
Loaded question, I think you might say, but I'll be brief. So yes, addressing diversity and equity issues is core to Code.org's mission. It's woven throughout all of our programming, from our curriculum to teacher professional development to advocacy and marketing, but we focus not only on gender and social economic diversity and access, but also increasing participation among students where we see the largest gaps: Black, Latinx, Native American, and Pacific Islander students. We tackle diversity and equity in several ways. First, we stress it's not our goal to have every student become a software engineer or developer. We work from the belief that computer science is a foundational subject. Our courses are designed to enable every student to participate with no prerequisite knowledge or background with technology. Computer science develops students' computational and critical thinking skills, and which shows them how to be creative. So not just use the app, but as you said, how do we teach them how to create an app? And Code offers emerging, our open source curriculum is free, as you said, Stephanie. 60 million students, but also 2 million teachers use Code.org. We introduce students to learning computer science at a very early age, before stereotypes influence their decisions. So Code.org has recently released our 2021 State of Computer Science report in collaboration with CSTA and ESEP. And this is how we measure. The report gives us national and state level computer science education policy, including policy trends, maps, state summaries, and implementation data. We were proud to announce that more than half, 51% of high schools now offer computer science. But we have a long way to go. We are improving access. 73% of Black students attend schools that offer computer science. However, if you look at enrollment, only 16% of the student population across 35 states are Black students. So we still have much to do and a long way to go. Female students make up 49% of elementary students, 44% of students in middle school, and 31% in high school. So we see that number is increasingly dropping as they get higher and higher into high school. So there's lots that we're doing, but we have a long way to go, and it's folks like here that's on this platform that we can get there.
That's great. Thank you, Jackie. So we now saying start early before stereotypes can take hold. Develop an interest. Have them build apps starting at 11 years old. And so, Dewana, I mean, you kind of take a handoff then. So from these early, how do they stay on track? I mean, what has been the most successful strategy of your reboot work so far to keep? We've talked about a little bit of attrition for girls through the younger grades. How do you keep them on track in higher ed?
I think the one thing that you'll know for sure, this panel is grounded in data. And reboot representation was founded on the heels of a report that looked at a couple of things. So one, you can go to the website and download it. It's 104 pages of amazing bedtime reading. But I also want you to a couple things to dive into and segue to the question that you asked. The report surveyed 32 technology companies wanting to understand what they were doing with regards to philanthropic spending and women. And what was uncovered, these amazing 32 technology companies representing $500 billion in revenue and $500 million in philanthropic giving were only spending 5% of that funding on women and girls in tech. And less than 0.1% of that was going to Black, Latina, and Native American women and girls in tech. So for those math people out there, that was only $335,000 in 2017. From those amazing companies that focused on Black, Latina, and Native American women and girls in tech. We've already talked about the pipeline shrinking. We looked at real data from public data, IPEDS numbers, looking at the portion, and for the sake of brevity, we say BLNA for Black, Latina, and Native American. So the portion of BLNA women graduating with computing degrees in 2017 was only 4% of that graduating population and was down by about 40% over the previous decade. So those two things alone. There's a saying that many of you might have heard of, rising tides raise all ships. Maybe, I got some head nods in the crowd. We focus specifically on Black, Latina, and Native American women because they are the least represented in the population. And we know that when you focus on the least represented in the population, it raises the tide for everyone involved and affected. So we also know that we want to make sure that we account for the barriers both at the intersection of race and gender. With that philanthropic focus, pooling that money from these amazing corporations that have joined the coalition and having a strategy that specifically focuses on recruiting and retention towards that computing baccalaureate degree is going to set up an amazing foundation for these women to be successful, not just in corporate, yes, in corporate, but not just in corporate, to go back and be teachers and educators and guidance counselors, get masters and PhDs, and be able to start to close the wealth gap.
So that $335,000 is an astonishing figure. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Victor, but really, surely you can do better than that. No, I mean,
let me save Victor a little bit. They are part of the coalition now.
No, I'm just saying, but it is an astonishing figure. It is an astonishing figure. And I mean, Victor, you're a long-time figure and leader in education, and you've gone into this corporate role. So tell us about the efforts that Amazon is doing and how you decide, where you put your resources.
Thanks, Stephanie. So Amazon Future Engineer launched just 3 years ago, and it's a childhood to career program, and it was an inspired Amazon recruiter was looking at his goals, the targets that he had to hit, and realized that there was no way to hit those targets just by doing what was being done at the time, and you had to work backwards much further, and the net of that was a program that works all the way back into elementary school. And so we do think that kind of investment across all the ages and stages, if you will, is necessary. And so I can say proudly that we are partners with all the organizations represented here today and a few others. And so we are working to help underwrite or subsidize teacher professional development all the way through from elementary school to high school. So in the elementary grades, that's teaching teachers how they can integrate computer science concepts into the regular curriculum. We're not asking anybody to pull away from the basic curriculum because, and then as you go into middle school and high school, we invest in more specialized certification of computer science teachers. But as the governor and others have noted, computer science is, there's an opportunity to specialize in it, but it's everywhere. And so it is even in the arts, even in philosophy, even in history. And so one of the things that we want to do is also shift people's mindset about what it means to study computer science. Yes, we are an employer, but the benefit here and the investments we're making are not at the end of the day to solve just an employment problem that we have. That is a problem, and there are other people at Amazon doing it, but our work is philanthropic, so I'm not bound by Amazon hiring goals or that kind of work. When we go into a community to support computer science education, we're really just trying to inspire students and inspire teachers and inspire all the grown-ups to have a broader understanding of what CS education is about.
So computer science is not just to be a propeller head coder, but is increasingly part of all kinds of enterprises, and part of all sorts of employers. I wanted to go back to you, Governor Hutchinson. People think of, Silicon Valley, Boston, Austin as, as tech places and sort of innovation hotspots. How has your efforts in expanding computer science changed the way employers view Arkansas?
Well, thank you. And you mentioned Silicon Valley. So after we started the computer coding initiative, I thought it'd be a good idea for me as governor to go out to Silicon Valley and tell all the high-tech companies there what we're doing, thinking in my naive mind that might cause them to relocate to Arkansas. Well, that was the last trip I've made to Silicon Valley because it didn't take me long to understand that they was very impressed with our initiative and what we're doing, and they just wanted our graduates, our students to come out there. And I said, this is not going to work. So I went back and focused on creating the tech jobs in our state so that our tech students can have jobs right there. And of course, we have incredible companies already in Arkansas, and they're global companies, they're in every field, and they are tech companies. And so they need this talent. But in addition, it did change the perspective of Arkansas, and that's really the question that you raised, that we started accelerator programs, bringing in startup tech companies in the financial sector, in the healthcare sector, and they came in and they saw what we're offering, and my goal was to create Arkansas as a micro hub of technology companies, a micro hub, and it's far exceeded my expectations we have relocated tech companies from California actually to Arkansas. We've had startup companies that say we can make it here in Arkansas with a talent pool that comes. And so it is working, and we're creating that system in Arkansas of the growth of tech companies, and we want to be able to continue that. I did want to second, I keep talking about computer science in high schools. We did integrate it into our K through 12 curriculum, which is critically important, as you indicate. And then also the diversity of computer science. I emphasize it as coding, but you're right, it goes into data analytics, it goes into autonomous vehicles, it goes into robotics, and on down the line. So the breadth of it now, that's what we focus on, is to have the diversity of our computer science programs.
Oh, that's great. So, Jackie, we're coming at definitions of diversity in different ways. We talked about changing the invitation and the kind of work that you can do in computer science, and that's been quite evident throughout this conversation already. You've certainly worked on that, on the ground. So expanding the invitation is one thing, but getting young people, particularly women and young people of color, to accept that, invitation is another. In your experience, what works not only to open the door and then to keep it open, but to actually get young people to walk through it?
It's a great question, and I don't think it's a simple answer. Otherwise, we would be out of jobs possibly. But in terms of, I think it just starts with a fundamental belief that all students should have the opportunity to have computer science, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their background, and truly believe that they deserve a engaging curriculum and a foundation just like math, just like science and reading, starting at the elementary level. And for a young woman that looks like me, to say not only do I feel like I belong, but I'm needed in the computer science and tech field. And so we examine the backgrounds of computer science teachers and supports that they need as well. The Kapor Center and the Computer Science National Teacher Association did a study, and they came up with several policies and practices so that we can see an increased diversity within computer science. One is to develop incentive structures to recruit and retain a diversity pool of computer science teachers. You probably heard of the saying, you can't be what you can't see. Well, if students don't see who's teaching in front of them that reflect themselves, then more than likely they're not going to walk through the door. We also have to build comprehensive teaching training certification that has an equity framework of computer science. How do we also show where equity is needed in computer science? Again, expand access to ongoing teacher professional development and prioritize computer science as a core subject. It'd be so wonderful to see the day that you could walk into every school and see that students are learning computer science. Can you imagine what that would look like? And you have to build a coalition to champion for equitable computer science implementation plans. We have states that have done it. How can other states learn from those states? We have districts that are doing it every day with the integration of other subjects. So we're not taking away from the elementary teacher. I used to be an elementary school teacher. If you're going to tell me I need to teach computer science, give me the time to do it. Or show me and give me the tools and support to do it as well. And so we want to keep students engaged at the elementary level, but keep that interest going into high school and into the technology companies, where they also have to see and have a feeling of belonging.
So Dewana, we're building that pipeline, and we're sort of making the case for a diverse kind of job and kind of work. How do we smooth the handoff from these great efforts into higher ed and the efforts that you're undertaking? What advice do you have for us?
Ooh, loaded question, no silver bullet. Everything that has been said so far, I think we see a lot of heads nodding, and there's no question or doubt with regards to the fact that there's been a case for so long about diversity and about having more diverse representation in tech, both in education, higher ed, and in industry. I think that even though there's been a case for it, it still hasn't happened to date. So I think it's more about how do we get there. And we're really big on data collection and disaggregation. So let's collect the data at every stage and everything that we do and disaggregate it at least by race and gender. So if we're talking to our corporate partners, that's with regards to recruiting, that's with regards to exit interviews. If we're talking about investments, if we're talking about philanthropic work, how are we impacting the populations that we're trying to serve? And are you actually serving the populations that you think you're serving? So with Reboot, we have a very narrow focus, and as we look to support nonprofit organizations and we say, give us the data, they say, oh yeah, of course, this is how our data looks, and then we get it, and it may be mostly underrepresented or mostly social economic with regards to how the students are impacted, but it still doesn't have enough girls or enough women. So making sure that we look at that data both by race and gender at the very least, because not all women are a monolith. Mm-hmm. Not all Black people are a monolith. So making sure that you're solving for the issues that you want. So that's the first thing. And then second, investing in college on-ramps. There's a heavy focus on K-12, which is absolutely necessary, absolutely needed. We need to continue to do that. But we're missing a critical portion of the pipeline with regards to higher ed. And so what does that look like to make sure that we fostered this development and excitement in young people at age 11 to do some coding? How do we make sure that she gets to college and also still maintains that interest and love for computing? So corporations were definitely focused, 60% of that educational funding in K-12, only 3% of that went to higher ed, and that's an untapped market where we can have a quicker return. So community college pathways. Every state has a different philosophy on how they navigate that. An example with Reboot, we've invested in 2 community college pathways, one here in the state of Florida with Miami-Dade Community Colleges and Florida International, another in California with UC Irvine. But really looking at, are we creating true pathways for students, all students, to be able to say, yes, I'm excited and interested in computing. I can start this foundation in community college and then be able to have a smooth transfer to that 4-year institution, or are there obstacles and barriers and gates along the way? So really at that state level, being able to examine what states are doing. And then third, making sure that we invest in teachers and mentors that look like the demographic that we're trying to serve. We've heard, Jackie, you already mentioned, if they see it, they can be it. That reigns true. We want all students to be able to see themselves in the places we want them to go. So whether we're talking about having teachers or guidance counselors of color and of both female and male, or whether we're talking about industry leaders and professionals and politicians that look like the entire community, making sure that we have that visible representation.
So, Victor, we've talked a lot about the steps on the pipeline. I know you don't work directly, on hiring manager, but you're in this. You've worked on this sort of pipeline for a lot of your career. What else do we need to do, and what do employers need to do to help make this case and accelerate the expansion and the diversification of this pipeline?
Yeah, so it's critical that the issue of data has come up, and I think you look at all the data that's been thrown around, and obviously, wittingly or unwittingly, we created systems that have excluded more than half of the world's population from access to the expressive and economic potential that exists through computer science. And so employers are part of that. And so employers also have to look at their data and set goals, make investments like Amazon is trying to do, and then look at their other ways that they can make an impact. And so this year we launched something called Meet an Amazonian, which was an effort to introduce students to people who work at Amazon and to take them behind the scenes to look at the tech that powers the many things that Amazon does. And so in very quick order, we've been able to reach tens of thousands of students in roughly 6,000 schools across the country, again, in just roughly 6 months of doing this work. And so that's something that we want to keep expanding and encourage other employers to expand. We would love to set a goal to have X number of students in Arkansas meet Amazonians and see that there is a path for them to make in tech. So I think that's another thing we can do is get out and explain the very many lives that exist in careers in technology. And Tawana was right. We also need to think about alternative pathways for folks. And so that means not always looking for the 4-year degree, not always looking for degrees from X schools. And so we have led an effort in Washington State to expand community colleges' abilities to offer full CS degrees. We also then, as a company, need to, have made a commitment to recruit students that come out of those programs. And, I think as an industry, we also need to move further in thinking about alternative certifications beyond the traditional higher ed certification as as a marker of skills and employability. And I think there are companies out there that are leading the way on that as well. So there are a lot of different things employers can be doing.
So we've talked a lot about the pipeline. I do have a question for you, Dewana. We talked a little bit about this in our interview. You have been a woman of color in tech. What about the sort of, the value proposition, diversifying the people who are working in tech? What changes in tech? What would be different? Because is that part of a value proposition? As I think about, we've talked a little bit about identity, we talked about belonging. What would be different if instead of just you in that, and at MasterCard, what if there had been, 10 of you or 20?
Ooh, I don't know that they can handle 10 of me.
Okay,
But,
okay, 3.
but there's already lots of data that talks about the value to an organization, the ROI, as we'll put it, when teams are diverse, critical thinking, more diverse products, et cetera, et cetera. We've all heard that. But I recently spoke to an executive at a company that focuses on AR and VR, just to give an example. And she was saying, Dewana, my team is not diverse, and I can't produce products for the masses and for the publics if it's going to have blind spots, if it's not going to be able to capture. This is an AR, VR, so if a person of color is not going to be seen, if a person of color can't, whatever the blind spot is, there were some cars, as an example, that were not looking for Black people. They didn't recognize them, and so that creates a safety issue, obviously. So what are those blind spots that we are trying to avoid, that we are going to be able to have a different perspective added to the equation, added to the team, that the mass team, if with the same point of view, is not going to be able to see? And then for that individual, that person of color that's an executive or a contributor to the team, they also have that sense of, yes, I belong here. Yes, I can be part of this team. Yes, I'm seen, I'm heard, and they want my contribution to this innovation, and they aren't isolated and then leave tech.
So part of the attrition is that. So we are, believe it or not, we're coming towards the end of our time. I want to do sort of a lightning round before we finish up, and Governor Hutchinson, I'll give you the last word for this one. We've got an audience of policymakers and reformers and leaders who are, very interested in this issue. If you had one piece of advice that you'd give leaders in this room who want to expand and diversify the workforce, what would it be? And Jackie, why don't I go ahead and start with you?
Wow. One piece of advice.
One piece of advice.
Just one. Okay. I think we have to make a long-term investment in CS teacher workforce. I mean, we have to make that investment if we're going to keep the interest of students and start at the K-12 level to ensure that there's equitable development of the next generation for computing professionals and informed citizens.
Great. Victor?
So mine's going to be easy, which is to say, follow the governor's lead. I really do think Arkansas is a model for being systematic about providing the supports, the funding, allowing computer science to serve as a core course for graduation in high school, and so follow the governor's lead.
Excellent. All right, Dewana?
I'm going to say, know that diversity is a feedback loop and not a checkbox. So it's something that you're going to have to iterate on and make sure that you're making modifications as necessary. And again, of course, I'm going to throw out that data, collect, disaggregate data by race and gender so that you know that you can solve for the actual things that you're trying to solve for.
So, Governor, what's the one piece of advice you have to fellow policymakers?
Well, first of all, I hope policymakers look at this issue and say this is important for our education, for our young people, and the future of your state. And so own it. You have to understand that there's going to be detractors about putting computer science in as a graduation credit. Superintendents are going to be resistant, so you really have to pursue it. And part of that is the public and educators, everybody across the board, give credibility to issues that you put money behind. And so part of that is, and one of the keys in Arkansas was, whenever we passed our initiative, we put $5 million every 2 years, and that has grown. That helps us to fund incentivizing teachers and training, and even we give bonuses to students that score a 5 or a 4 on an ACT computer science test, advanced placement. And so that's how you can use money effectively. So own it and put money behind it, and it gives you credibility.
No, that's great. So thank you all very much for we wanted this to be a really concrete example of an issue where there's a lot of consensus. You have diverse public and private organizations that are working on this. You have models of success. And I think that if you take away some lessons here from this tech pipeline, one is start in elementary school. I love the idea that your 11-year-old daughter created the app for your campaign and you won.
That's right.
And so early parts of success through K-12. And to think about some of these softer things. We talked a lot about data and being able to disaggregate data and measure over time, but also these things like belonging and representation. But that there are steps you can measure along that pipeline, and as the governor's model showed us, commitment year over year, as each of these organizations have shown us, to measure the progress year over year. 1 year is great, but that's the thing about a pipeline. You can measure how big it is, how diverse it is over time, and then the benefits then to employers, to the state's economy are actually measurable and attainable. So it's a real opportunity for, I think, success stories in your states, and we certainly have them here. So thank you all for the work that you do, for sharing your stories. So please join me in thanking our panel.